She lifted her chin and smiled breezily. "Nope, it's just me." Exactly why the court case had been so fiddly. She'd had to convince 3 consecutive magistrates not only that she had a familial right of first preference to her sister's embryos, but also that she was fit to be their parent. Despite being technically unemployed, despite being, for all intents and purposes, estranged from her own parents, despite being single. Did she have support? Nope, not a whit. She would have said whatever it took to make sure Gwen's embryos didn't go to strangers, or into a furnace. The law was a hard blue line, and she'd balanced precariously right on top of it. "Fill this out, please." The clerk slid a clipboard across the stylish countertop for her admission details, her eyes already sliding away to the next client. Instinct made Belle turn as the smell of fresh earth reached her on a slap of cold London air. The whisper-quiet hospital doors had admitted a man, broad-shouldered, lean-hipped. He strode towards them, pushing fingers through damp brown hair, his scuffed work boots squeaking on the polished hospital floor. He was the complete cowboy cliché, only missing the Stetson. Who got around like that in London? Belle's eyes drifted down long, denim-clad legs to those boots. They'd genuinely seen time out in the fields, and were unmistakably the source of the eau de earth, since the rest of him was straight from the shower spotless. The familiar scent gave her flagging spirits the tiniest boost. Outdoors, her favourite place in the world. Not that she'd be getting out of her flat and into the wilds much once she was heavy with child. Another sacrifice she'd willingly make to raise her sister's children, though not without some sorrow. As she lifted her eyes, she realized he'd tracked her glance down to his mud-crusted boots. She quickly returned to her paperwork as he spoke to the admissions clerk.
"Russell Ives is expecting me."
Every hair on Belle's neck stood on end, and she sucked in a breath as painful as the coldest blast of Thames-chilled air. Australian, not American. She hadn't heard the Aussie accent for 2 years since they'd lost Drew. To hear it now on a stranger, on this day of all days. She blinked rapidly past the unexpected sting in her eyes. "Legal depart..." Tanned fingers shot out into mid-air to halt the clerk's speech. Her mouth snapped shut with an audible click. Belle felt heat on her bent head and glanced up from her mountain of admissions paperwork to meet 2 male eyes. They should have been pretty, the ash of the tempestuous skies outside and with lashes to rival her own, but they were flat and lifeless, and they were staring right at her.
"Do you mind?"
His voice was as empty as his eyes. Belle stiffened immediately at the presumption. She gave him her best up-yours smile. "Not at all. Say whatever you want." His silent glare was all the answer she got. God, he even looked a bit like Drew, in the heavy-lidded shape of his eyes, the furrowed brow. Who knew, maybe all Australian men looked a little bit alike. Colonial origins, small founding gene pool and all that. But this man's arrogant manner was nothing like the charming Aussie her sister had fallen in love with, even if the single eyebrow lift was straight out of Drew's playbook. Her stomach curled, his former playbook. Sobriety brought her back to the whole purpose of today's visit. This wasn't a day to be messing with the minds of egotistical foreigners. But it galled her to concede even something as simple as an admissions desk, so she took just a tiny bit longer than necessary pulling her papers together and tugging the loaned clipboard to her chest. Then she stepped quietly away and crossed to one of the comfortable waiting room couches to finish the forms. Maybe his wife's in here somewhere dying of cancer. Reasonable Belle forced her way forward to try and justify the man's appalling manners. Maybe he's dying of something himself. Her eyes flicked up briefly and assessed the back view of him.